What's up, everybody? Welcome to the CanesInSight Daily Podcast, powered by Anajar and Levine Accident Attorneys. Been doing homework, making calls, have the latest on the status of the recruiting class after a huge surge with a lot of commitments, see where the kind of dust is settled, what's next on the horizon. A lot of big-time battles. I wrote the bank. It's on CanesInsight.com, 7.4 million posts and counting for free. But we'll be talking about it here on the CanesInsight Daily Podcast. First, and we also have some special guests, some mystery guests you'll see. Also, my man 50 from Category 6 will be on as well. But first, want to talk about, some folks that are always working, always gathering information, always doing the best they can for you as their client. That is Anajar and Levine Accident Attorneys. If you or someone you care about has been injured in an accident, you could be entitled to significant compensation. Dial 1-800-747-FREE, 1-800-747-3733. Take back control of your life with Anajar and Levine. Hopping in all the way from the Iberian Peninsula.
Let me tell you, man, I've been relegated to a mystery guest, man, in less than a week. It's crazy how it's like recruiting, man. Things change quick around here.
When you say mystery and you hop in, people they pop, man. It's a big moment for the pop in. I wish you were here in Miami. I know I've watched the draft at your house before. I think I was at your house when we drafted Tyler Hero, future All-Star with the 14th pick. So up late.
That might have been. I think that might have been a few. Hero was a few years before. I think we watched. Man, which draft was this? Because I liked the pick. It wasn't Hero, but I did 100%
because we picked Opala later on.
Was it? It wasn't Jovic? Was it?
Jaquez? We saw both of those. We saw Jaquez
or
too.
Jaquez.
Yeah. Another great pick. And then yesterday with my man Kasparis, Yakahotchitz.
Dude, that's what I'm here in Sevilla right now. I'm at the Alcazar right now. I visited it this morning. A beautiful castle palace. From of course like the 8th century. But the first thing that happened when I came downstairs in my hotel this morning, my dad said, "The Heat, baby. You see who they got? Steele." And I'm like, "Man, I was asleep. What are you talking about?"
You were asleep.
He was like, "Yeah, I was asleep. I was well asleep." So let's see, man. Let's hope it works out for the boys in South Beach, man. Let's see.
Yeah, shout out to Aries LaPierre. Knows that we got another Goran Dragic. She's about 64% finishing at the rim. You kidding me? Filling up the box score. 19 years old, strong body. Love the pick. I'm thinking my spidey sense is tingling after hearing that Shams report. Wiggins for Kuminga seems like the move right there on a sign and trade. So 22-year-old Kuminga joining the culture. Let's see how it goes here, man. We got recruiting to talk about. I can talk Heat all day, but we got 50 there sitting in the bullpen waiting to come out here once we finish the bank. But I wanted to, get into the bank, Pete. 7.44 million posts and counting on CanesInsight.com. Post it for free. Like to go through it here. This is everything I've been able to collect from inside the building on the status of recruiting. Like I said, I put it out there for free on the website, CanesInsight.com. You can see that for free with all the reaction and everything else. But I wanted to go through it here on the show because we're getting a lot of questions after this flood of commitments. There's crystal balls rolling around, people trying to figure out what's going on. So I wanted to just jump in. Starting with the running back position, Pete, because, our guy, Jay Lamar, man, I feel like we've been watching his highlights for months, goes to Georgia. I'm not surprised because once Georgia really was kind of isolated in the amount of running backs that they were after, it would be hard to beat them for Jay Lamar when he was really their top back left. They're still after Derek Cooper, but I feel that's a Miami trend. We'll see. But to me, the big story here is just the dust settling at running back with Miami continue to be confident on Derek Cooper, the Rivals MVP of that 5-star showcase or whatever big event they just had out there nationally. He was the MVP. Javian Mallory, who was the MVP of the Rivals Miami camp, actually over Derek Cooper at that event, had visited Alabama. There was some concern about whether he would flip to Bama. Also, Miami really didn't like that he visited Bama, so Jay Lamar was brought in. I think they could have had Jay Lamar if they really pushed to get Jay Lamar after that visit. But because Derek Cooper was the primary focus as far as that big bullet at the running back position and remains that big focus, I think they're perfectly happy to keep Javion Mallory, who they like a lot, productive back, shifty, strong, local, and then really lock in on Derek Cooper, as we've been saying on the show for the past month, and really for beyond that, but even just since Mallory started flirting with Alabama, this is all about Derek Cooper. Derek Cooper is the focus of all this. Miami needs to land Derek Cooper. I think they're going to get that done. I can't see any way Derek Cooper signs elsewhere unless something catastrophic happens. I mean, even if he commits elsewhere, which I don't expect him to do, I think he will commit to Miami. They'd still be on him crazy. So I think Derek Cooper will be a Cane. I'd be surprised if that doesn't work out that way. And then Mallory, I think he stays in the class. Alabama just flipped a running back from Illinois. So they've moved on. I think this is going to be a Derek Cooper, Javion Mallory running back class.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll say from kind of the outside looking in, I think you could probably say if this ends up the way that it's looking like it will, you could say that every party here is going to end up being pretty happy, right? Because look, Miami has wanted to keep Mallory in the class. Like you said that for a while, but at the same time, he was looking at his options elsewhere. Miami put themselves in a position to potentially land a Jay Lamar. I'm sure Jay Lamar, NIL wise, was helped with his situation at Georgia, having dealt with Miami. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. I just think that in today's era of the way this thing works, you can, like, there were people questioning, well, Miami's recruiting Mallory. I mean, Miami's recruiting Lamar. So of course you got to say that Mallory should be looking at his options. Like, these are Canes fans. We have them in the comments saying, look, everyone's kind of looking at their options here. But again, I think that this could end up being one of those rare situations where everyone ends up being happy. I'm talking about even Georgia landing Jay Lamar, right? Like, Bama, I'm sure, wants Mallory. But yeah, I think if it ends up this way, then Miami is thrilled.
Yeah, I totally agree. Question from Daryl Young: in your opinion, who's better, Mallory or Lamar? I'll say that I was surprised. This before, kind of Lamar started trending more towards Georgia. This is when he was still talking with Miami heavily, and Mallory was still kind of in the weeds. I heard people actually say they preferred Mallory over Lamar just because of his balance, on the game tape, not the highlights necessarily, but on the game tape, just more consistent balance, more consistent lean. I personally say Jay Lamar. I mean, I just think the upside with him, if it all clicks, is just too special. I mean, he just has really rare stuff. I think the downside is probably lower with the Lamar, but I think because of the upside, you go with Lamar in that comparison, just because he's so dynamic. But I have heard, truthfully, this is again before this situation settled like it did, there are people that actually believe that when you watch the game film, that they have Mallory over Lamar because of the consistent balance and the way he runs, just kind of in terms of just consistent chunks. Again, before all the dust settled, people were saying that, and I don't necessarily agree. I would go Jay Lamar because of just the dynamic play, but they're close, man. I think, one thing, go ahead, Pete.
Well, and I was just going to, again, kind of reiterate this point here that C. Marquise Smith says, honestly, pushing Mallory out of the class for Jay Lamar would have been a bad look optics-wise for South Florida recruiting. The residuals would have been costly. Mario and his recruiting team know what they're doing. They weren't trying to push him out of this class. Again, like, we can say that, and we can also kind of look at it the other way as, like, Miami feels like they're in a good position with Cooper right now. But if Cooper goes another way, I think that they would have been pretty happy with. Obviously, Cooper's been the guy, but there was a chance that it would have been Lamar and Mallory in the class. I don't think many people have considered that part of the equation either. So they were not Trump. Like, they wanted him in this class. But you got to keep recruiting.
And here's what I'll say, Pete, to just put a bow on the running back room. Cooper, we're fighting Texas, we're fighting Ohio State, we're fighting Georgia. Jay Lamar, you fought Georgia. Georgia ended up winning that battle. Again, I think you could have had Jay Lamar if you really pushed on his visit. Mallory, you're fighting Alabama, right? So these are the battles that you want to be fighting. This is the weight class that you want to be participating in. And this is the way that you really want to be recruiting at the running back position to pair with what I think is the best offensive line class in the country.
So let's move along. We're already getting tons of questions about James Johnson, for example, who we'll talk about him here. That was your next bullet point here in the bank. So obviously Miami has beaten out Georgia here on a couple big time recruits, and Georgia just beat Miami on Jay Lamar. You know, we can't say one without the other, right? But it looks like they are trying to do what they can to land James Johnson, which would be, I mean, this would be, there's not really any way to sugarcoat this. It would be a massive loss to Miami's class if this happens.
No question. I mean, defensive tackles is the name of the game. We all know that when it comes to winning championships. I think what you see here is, you know, there are all the memes about Mario stuff and Kirby in a locker and all that. I mean, look, we're going toe to toe with Georgia, which from where we've been is, you know, a big step up. But the truth is, you know, Georgia's a real deal program. They have money too, right? And of course, they have the brand that they can sell with all the success that they've had over the past, you know, 15, 20 years, particularly the last 5 years. You know, defense, they went 3 defensive tackles picked in the first round between Wyatt, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter. I may be skipping people, more defensive ends too, if you add that in. So I think they're going to push back. The idea that we're just going to stuff Georgia in a locker repeatedly, I think, is a little unrealistic. So Georgia, I think, is pushing back. You know, James Coley, guys like T-Rob, Kirby Smart, these guys do not like losing battles to Miami. Vance Spafford, that Miami stole, that was a straight victory over Georgia. I mean, they wanted to keep him bad. They're not happy about that. You know, Jackson Cantwell, obviously. We'll see how Brett Kaloje goes. But they're going to push back. And I think you saw crystal ball from Derek Cooper to Georgia. I think that one, again, I'm not that concerned about. And even the person who put it in was kind of hedging. The James Johnson crystal ball to Georgia, he announces, I believe, on Saturday. That one I could see going more Georgia's way, just because, again, they're making that push. James Johnson, I know he plays for Miami Northwestern, was at Fort Myers last year, but he's from Patterson, New Jersey, I believe. I know he's from New Jersey, I think Patterson. So it's not like he's, you know, a guy that grew
hometown.
Up. He's not like he grew up eating conch, you know what I mean? And putting salt on his mangoes. I mean, this guy's from New Jersey. So the hometown thing with him is not as prominent. So I think it's an open battle. And when you're battling Georgia for defensive tackles they want, it's a tough battle. You got to win those. Like, I'm not making so I'm not saying it's not important to win them. I quite frankly think defensive tackle is the most important position to win in high school. But yeah, I can see this one going Georgia's way.
So, tight end position, obviously big pickup earlier this week with Izzy Briggs there, a guy who can, I think we both agree, can be a real mismatch problem. Obviously, his competition is not great, but I don't think there's much of a concern there. Obviously, the rankings nationally don't seem to be too concerned with that either. But Zach Turner, someone that you and I, when we first watched his stuff, were huge fans of, in terms of again, a different sort of mismatch problem than Briggs. But I just think that as a guy kind of in the slot there is going to be very, very tough to deal with for some of these defensive backs, and just too quick for a pure linebacker, right? So you think Miami's in a good spot with him, and not out of it either with Hezi Kent, who I think if you watch the show, you know what a fan of him that I am. And he's a completely different sort of weapon than either of the other two guys.
Yeah, Superman Kent. So we've been saying that it's been trending towards the Zachary Turner, Israel Briggs tight end class. Saw Israel Briggs commit. That one's done. Talking to people, just very excited about what he brings talent-wise. And they think he's just going to develop a lot here. You know, he didn't have a lot of structure. The more you learn about Israel Briggs, you know, he really had a tough situation there in California. His mother passed away at a young age. His father, it was reported, I believe, has Parkinson's, had some homelessness. I mean, this is all publicly reported. So, I mean, he really was dealing with a lot of adversity there. And I think coming to Miami, more insulated environment, you know, certainly just from a lodging, meal standpoint, workout standpoint, he's going to have a lot more consistency there. So I think that's, you know, there's a lot of faith. First of all, great relationship between the player and the staff, and they think he's going to really flourish in Miami. Of course, he's a top 10 tight end in the country. I believe he's up to 70. He's in the top 70 overall of all players on 247, super athlete. So we mean, again, a lot of upside there. Zachary Turner, we talked about him a bunch. I think he's, you know, one of my favorite players in this class. Tough, super productive, extremely athletic, great receiver on a great team. Local legend there in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I think Zachary Turner will be a Cane sooner than later. But the update really to me is Hezi Superman Kent, your guy. We've talked about it forever. from Brunswick, Georgia, right there on the Florida-Georgia border. I thought we were kind of out. I thought it was Texas, Florida, right? And he was getting Florida crystal balls, and Florida State was in there. I mean, just we were kind of on the outside looking in. But I heard that there's still communication as of yesterday. I'm not saying has he kept in the class or anything like that, but I heard that as of yesterday, he had been initiating conversations, which I think was a little bit of a surprise, certainly for me to hear, I think in general. So the follow-up question is, would we take Turner, Briggs, and Hezzy Kent? And I was told unequivocally, yes, we'll take him. So I think
and bagging up here says, not to cut you off, D, but bagging up here says, I keep hearing more 12 personnel. What are we turning? Because I think it kind of goes hand in hand with what we're talking about. He says, what are we turning into the Pats with Hernandez and Gronk? We used a lot of 2 and 3 tight end sets last year.
Ton. Worked out pretty good. Number one offense in the nation. You had McCormick playing a lot. Arroyo was always on the field, obviously. And then, Riley Williams
played his role. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then Lofton played here and there. So I think, that there's a misconception. I'm not saying this is coming from bagging up, but just in general, there's a misconception. Like you use more tight ends, use a fullback, which I've been calling for Miami to do more of. You're kind of going backwards, right? Old school bro style, 1980s offense. But the truth is, Oklahoma uses these kind of formations with Lincoln Riley when they were putting up 1 million points. We did that last year. We put up, incredible amount of points. You look at the NFL, the teams that are using a fullback, which is like the most old school kind of caveman offense thing in the world. Baltimore Ravens, 49ers, Miami Dolphins, right? So when you have versatile players that can block and that can catch, it opens up a lot of different options, and you could be very explosive with, that kind of personnel. JD Carmona saying Miami had the number one offense in the nation because of Ward. We'll see what Dawson's got with Becky. I mean, look, Ward is the first overall pick, so obviously the guy is a special player. But Washington State's offense last year was 50th in the nation. The year before that, I believe, also in the kind of in that range. So takes more than just one player. LSU had Joe Burrow, who was the best number one overall pick, and we know how good he is. But it was also about other things going on.
Hold on, D. Someone's knocking on my door. Let me make sure it's not a housekeeping or something. I'll be right back.
There you go. The Spanish authorities are checking in on Pete. They're checking his Twitter. All right, so I'll keep this thing rolling here. But like Drago said, what's old is new again, man. As far as fullbacks old, now the hip modern offensive coordinators, right, that wear the sneakers, they're all using the fullback. So,
they love me here. They were just giving me some free water.
How's the water?
Pretty warm, like the rest of the country right now. But
Heart of Sports is talking about is Briggs. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Pete.
I said it'll play though. It's water.
Heart of Sports saying Briggs, a junior in high school, not going to play in Miami at 200. Which, by the way, he is 200 now. He's not under. He'll be 230, 240. I think he'll gain weight. I'm not that big, but he'll be heavier. You getting mints on your pillow there, Pete?
No, just water. They did deliver some delicious orange dark chocolate the other evening though. It was wonderful.
Yeah, very controversial. The fruit and chocolate. I know my wife hates it, but I think it's all right. Let's see what we have here. Brandon's saying you didn't mention Lopez in the bank. How's that looking? I didn't. I realized I did, not on purpose. I just actually forgot when I realized when I wrote it. So I think with Lopez, here's the deal. Miami wants Lopez big time. I mean, Mario Cristobal really, really, really wants Lopez. He is a high priority. He had a great visit. I think that the thing with him is he wants to be at Miami. Miami really wants him. The question is, from his standpoint, he wants to make sure he's going to have an opportunity in basketball. He wants to make sure that, he's going to have an opportunity at receiver. I mean, you see obviously Vance Spafford and guys like this committing. So I think that's kind of what's being worked through right now. But Miami would kill for his Jason Lopez. They know he's going to be a stud. Mario really, really wants him, and he wants to be a Cane. So I think over time it'll work itself out, hopefully sooner than later. I'd still probably say we get him, but again, I think he's making sure that he's going to have the opportunity, which he will, because again, Miami really, really wants this guy. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it. Rockstyle Monsters, a great show yesterday with 50 in category 6. Chasers, the mystery producer, birthday boy. Like, share, and subscribe. We got 50 in the bullpen right now, man. So right when we finish with the bank, we'll bring in the closer. Awesome. That was a great time. If you haven't seen that show, check it out. Category 6. Just write that into YouTube. Great show. Probably my favorite show to go on and just visit and hang out. They do an awesome job over there with category 6. We're going to check that one out. You check it out right when you're done with this one, man. Just go to YouTube and check out category 6. All right.
So let's talk about the D line, because there's a lot to unpack here. I just highlighted it. Again, if you guys want to read everything we're talking about here, go to CanesInSight.com, completely free. Hit that like and subscribe. D, by the way, I think I checked a little while ago. I think we're like 80 away from 10K in terms of subscribers on YouTube here. So let's go, guys. Let's get that final push, man. We appreciate the support as always, but 10K is a nice milestone. So let's get it done, please. But D-line, like I said, like there's obviously they're recruiting these blue chip guys in Bryce Perry Wright, Anthony Jones, Tank Jones, Nolan Wilson, Jaquez Wilkes, Lamar Brown. You mentioned here at the end, you don't have too much confidence on him, but let's talk about this position group as a whole here.
Yeah, so obviously this is an important group, and you got to get some size.
And this is outside of James Johnson, who, if you're just joining us now, we had an update on him because I know this happens. We'll talk about this group now, and someone may have just joined. We had a pretty, a few-minute update on him earlier in the show, so you can rewind and check that out.
Yes, you got Tyson Bacon committed. You still need to add size, both at defensive tackle, defensive end, and some of these guys kind of overlap a little bit. The names I'm hearing that Miami's pushing hard for: Bryce Perry Wright, the defensive tackle / defensive end, kind of like a Ruben Bain type from Buford, Georgia. Has visited unofficially. He's visited officially. I think he might have visited unofficially twice, and also officially. Texas is there. Texas A&M is there. Clemson is there. But we are right in the battle. Tom Lloyd from 247 was hearing some stuff about Bryce Perry Wright in Miami. Miami feels they're right in the mix there from talking to him yesterday. Jaquez Wilkes canceled his visit to Miami because of legitimate family issues. Nothing too bad, but in fact, it's actually something good. But he was not able to visit. So that was legit. That wasn't like some kind of Auburn money pay or anything like that. He just could not visit. So Miami, kind of like with Vance Spafford, they'll continue to work there. They thought they had some momentum getting into that visit. So we'll see how that one resolves. And it's a dead period now. It's going to be interesting to watch. And he visited in spring, though, Jaquez Wilkes, so he's been here. Anthony Jones also visited in spring from Mobile, Alabama, Auburn, Alabama. I mean, the schools you think are in the mix. Miami, as far as the out-of-state schools, I think has done the best job there. They'll continue to push. And then Nolan Wilson, I listed as a DT because I think he's more of an interior guy for the Canes. He measured in at 260, 259 maybe at the 5-star challenge for Rivals. 4-star top 100 defensive lineman from Picayune, Mississippi. Alabama's also in the mix there, but Nolan Wilson had a great visit. Paul Erickson, the Razor Ramon of the Great Plains, asking what Kennedy banknote discussed yet. I'm talking about it right now. So a lot of talk about, we talk about the depth in the defensive line class, right? You got to get guys into the class that are going to be the defensive tackle in particular that are going to hopefully, give you the opportunity to ignore defensive tackle in the portal in 3 years, because you don't want to be living in the portal for defensive tackles. They're too expensive for their talent level when they get old. So you want to bring those guys in and let them grow. So I think a lot of that talk has been about, at that particular position has been about Freddie Wilson. So Freddie Wilson, somebody who visited, he was at camp the past weekend. He was someone Miami's visited in person. He visited officially from Spruce Creek up there by Daytona. But the name I'm hearing as far as like more of an option for that spot is actually Anthony Kennedy from Little Rock. Bigger, higher rated player, more athletic, just more kind of upside player who visited officially a couple of weeks ago. I had not heard his name for a while, so I was surprised to hear it come back. But of course, the natural question is he coming back because James Johnson's getting crystal balls? And those things are not separate. I heard it was much more about like him versus a Freddie Wilson, with him having the more upside of that equation. So we'll see how that one goes. Lamar Brown, I've heard buzz on Lamar Brown. Miami would kill to have Lamar Brown. They value him extremely highly from Baton Rouge, but I think Texas A&M most likely there, at least for now. But Miami does think that if they can get this thing into a very strong place, like, it's a top 6 class, they're in a good position here, then ultimately they will be able to flip 1 or 2 guys during the season, like they did in 24, like they did in 23, like they did in 22. They didn't do as much for the class of 25. It was, that was a bad close. They're trying to close more like the year they got Armando Blunt, Justice Scott, the year they got Jordan Lyle, Sampson, etc. So I think that's their focus, is to get this class as good as they can get, and then get just 1 or 2 flips, as opposed to needing to flip a lot of guys. So that's kind of where they're at that particular spot.
So let's get to the position that's, I would argue, is the most talked about this cycle, and probably the last couple cycles as well. The wide receiver spot. And you just talked about Jason Lopez a little while ago. Vance Spafford, obviously in the class within the last few days here. But we all understand they have to land. At one point, we're hoping for both Keys and Russell. But I think at this point, realistically, you understand it will be one of them, with Tristan Keys being the more likely of the two.
Yeah, so this is, we kind of skipped the lead, right? This is the one that we get the most attention, right?
Yeah.
On so with Keys, he's in town. I don't know if he's still. I think he's still in town. There's the OT 7-on-7, which is the national championship of 7-on-7, is in Fort Lauderdale. So I believe he's in town for that. He's been in town twice unofficially and an official visit. So I always, let's say, follow the visits, right? We interviewed him in person. Now he's the kind of guy, and we might have all known. The only analogy I can use is like a girl maybe you grew up with, and everybody thinks that she likes them, and then there can only be one really. So somebody's kind of getting led on. I think that's what Tristan. He's a very charismatic guy. He's a very positive guy. So everywhere he visits, people are like, "Oh man, we're gonna get this dude." You know what I mean? Why I like Miami for Keys is Miami's an Adidas school. LSU, no one expects him to go there. So the two schools that you would expect him to flip to would be Miami, which is Adidas, he's an Adidas athlete. Tennessee, which I heard is switching to Adidas, and Texas A&M, which is Adidas. Those are really the schools. Alabama was another visit on his list, and Alabama and him, they agreed to cancel the visit. Now, I don't know if that's due to Adidas or what, but to me, when I'm looking at just how way it's playing out, it seems to be zeroing in on those 3 Adidas schools. So people ask, what's Adidas's role? I don't know. I don't know the contractual.
So I can explain how, from my understanding of how most of these work. If he were to go to a Nike school, he obviously can't wear Adidas on the field. He would still be able to wear it and rep it off the field, but anywhere in the facility of the school. If you were to go to Alabama, which is a big Nike school, he would not in the facility be allowed to wear anything Adidas, right? It's technically, right? And I saw it at times, even guys would be wearing like Nikes around the facility. They'd kind of be told like, you can't do that. But with a guy who is in Keys' position as a legitimate paid, for him, why wouldn't you want to go to an Adidas school and rock the freshest Adidas stuff, there already? So it's a big deal in that sense. It's not going to hurt. He's not going to make any less money on the deal. He's making the same. I haven't seen his deal, but normally it is, he wouldn't be able to wear the stuff. And why wouldn't you want to be able to? If you're that brand athlete, it just doesn't make sense to.
Totally agree. And again, I think follow the trends. When you see LSU, Tom Loy said it on 247. Don't take my word for it. No one expects him to really sign with LSU. I think LSU for Calvin Russell, most likely the landing spot. So take them out of the equation. Alabama, they canceled the visit. So you're really left with Miami, Texas A&M, Tennessee. It just makes the action suggest that this is important. And I think the actions also suggest that Tristan Keys likes being in South Florida. He's here for the 7-on-7 tournament, but I heard he's taking pictures on his Instagram, just enjoying life. And he's been here a bunch, and I've heard from many sources connected to him, just observing him, that he likes it here. My personal observation, Pete, I know you agree. he's a Miami kind of guy. You don't see him and think he's like trying to find, like he didn't show up and like look like he's wanting to, hunt for deer. Not that that's a bad thing, obviously, but though we struggle to get those kind of guys. Whereas him, I think he wants to be in a city. He wants to be, wearing nice clothes, like being out there. That's kind of the impression I get from him. So to me, I've always thought that made sense. Him here, he always talks about the fact that we had the number one offense in the country, which we obviously did, but he notices that, he talks about that. So I think it makes a lot of sense for Tristan Keys to come to Miami. We'll see if we can get that one done. I heard Miami, again, they're going to make a very, very strong push, and they've had confidence there. But, it's recruiting, man.
Johnny says, I think we'll be portaling for a receiver in the offseason. My brother, I think we'll be in the portal in every position. Maybe not O-line. No, next year probably O-line too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, let's keep this thing moving. Got a few more bullet points to get to here. Speaking about offensive line, Brett Kaloje, IMG, Miami in a dogfight here down the stretch. I would say they feel pretty good based on what I've heard. Still, they understood they'd be going through this part of the process, which is the kind of what Jackson Cantwell did, right? And in the end, it worked out well. Not the same recruitment as we know, but I still think Miami's in a pretty good spot here.
Yeah, I think.
Hey, shout out to our boy Alex Dono from Locked On Canes. He's in Italy right now, so good to see you. Good to have you on here, Alex. Appreciate you.
Yeah, man. Shout out to Dono, man. He's been killing it. You got an open invitation on this show. We'll talk. Obviously, loves going on your show, man. You guys kick butt. He says he will not come home tomorrow to secure the number one class. Yeah, no, tough assignment out there in the homeland. I know Dono reps that Italian flag, man. So he's out there in the motherland, enjoying some good food and still still putting out work as well. It's the podcaster life, man. A lot different than being a lawyer, I'll tell you that.
So Kaloje.
So Kaloje. We have screwed this up so many times. He's gonna commit to Georgia just because we messed up his name so many times. But Brett Kaloje from IMG, a guy we think it could be honestly an instant starter. Maybe not for Miami just because of how the offensive line looks. I don't know how it's going to look next year, but hopefully you're kind of veteran at that position. But I think he's like a Francis Malinois, someone that can start right away. In his case, interior, Georgia, Ohio State, Tennessee, USC. I mean, all the teams on the top of the recruiting rankings. So big time football when it comes to Brett Kaloje. I talked to him.
We're gonna call him BK, man. That's what we're gonna call him. The king, BK.
BK. When I talked to him on his visit and just was around his family, I got strong Miami impressions there. I just think him and Cantwell had a nice connection. We've been recruiting him hard since he was like a freshman in high school, maybe even before that. And he knows that. He talks about it all the time. He's a very cerebral guy, professional process. He knows that, we produce offensive linemen like that. I just think, it's like there's a guy who's traveled, his family's always traveled for work and stuff. So I just think he went to IMG, that's a big commitment there. I think he's just the kind of guy that he's going to treat this like, an NFL free agent, or like a kid going to college, right, for academics. Mm-hmm. And the family can afford to take him to all the different schools. It's like one of those processes. I don't think it's going to be like a spur of the moment deal. Obviously, we're getting deeper into it here. But the intel I received on Kaloje is that Miami's going to really put the pressure on to try to close this one. So I think it either goes Miami's way or another way pretty soon. We said that for a little bit, but that's the sense I get is that it's going to come to a head sooner than later. And I would bet on the Canes there. But when you're talking about these other schools, man, I mean, you got other big time programs in the mix. I would bet on the Canes there, though, on Kaloje.
Now looking at, we're all over the place here, man. We're going from O-line to defensive back.
Yeah. Keep them guessing.
But we're here at defensive back. Brody Jennings it has been a guy that I would say really in the last like month and a half has has emerged as one of their top targets there. At corner, Devin Jackson, former Florida commit, ton of physical tools there. We're huge fans of his upside. And then Blake Stewart, his versatility, the ball skills there. I like each of these guys because they're all different in a sense. You're not getting the same player here, but all three very high on Miami's board.
Yeah, look, you're seeing a little bit of some trending when it comes to Blake Stewart, maybe to Clemson. You knew Clemson was going to be a tough out there at that position. They're good at recruiting defensive backs. They're good at recruiting defensive backs from Atlanta. They put those guys in the first round. Think of Terrell and his brother. So I would say he's probably the least likely of that crew, where Brody Jennings was really trending towards a flip before, the tragedy he dealt with his father passing away right before his Miami visit. Did take the visit though. And Devin Jackson, just kind of everybody's in on that one. You're hoping Will Harris can get that one home with the relationship. So I'm not saying we're to get these three. In fact, I'd be surprised if we got all three, but these are the names to watch at defensive back. I think you really got to get safety taken care of. So if you don't split Devin Jackson and Blake Stewart at the least, there's going to be some soul searching and a board shuffling, but you got to get one of those two, in my view.
The issues at DB and wide receiver, man. Let's hope they come to an end soon.
Corner looks good. Corner looks good. I think corner looks good. I mean, Jalen Waters is a superstar, I think, and that's how he's looked at in the building. John Tavius Wyman, just 4-star from Georgia, just won the Rivals 5-star challenge MVP at defensive back. Cannon Portis will be solid there. So I think corner will be okay. You just need more. Yeah.
Alex Dono, Locked On Canes, going in here on the Wisconsin lawsuit because there was a question if there was any chance that Xavier Lucas wasn't going to be able to play this year.
Yeah, it says it's a walking contradiction. They sue Miami for tampering with a contract. They refuse to sue Xavier for allegedly breaking that contract. Right. This is all about just trying to get the contract blessed. I've done a whole show on it. I really think that the main story of this, we know what Wisconsin wants to do. They want to get the Big Ten, really more than Wisconsin, wants that contract to be blessed. So it's of course treated like a real contract, and they can use that contract to hold down tampering in the conference. That's what they want. That's their goal with this. I think they also want to make a mess and get some bad testimony from Miami, so they go to Congress and say, hey, Congress, fix this, because Congress is really the only one that can kind of just get the law out of the NCAA's hair and just protect them from losing every court case like they have. So I think they want to make a mess and go to Congress and saying, look at this Xavier Lucas thing, man. We got to get this thing fixed. That's what I think is the end game, those two things. But the interesting thing is, at least from a legal perspective, let's assume Congress doesn't get involved to change the laws. They're making arguments in this case that contradict what they're saying in the bigger cases about antitrust and employment, basically saying, yeah, these guys aren't employees, but Miami tampered with our contract, which was for pay for play, because he's not playing for us. It's just a contradictory position with those two. And that's what I think is going to really hurt Wisconsin and the Big Ten and the NCAA in the end with this lawsuit, assuming Congress does not get involved. So that's it, Pete. I know you got
technically the last thing here that you have here in the notes is this last note that basically says that the message is that the staff wants to head into the season at a healthy place, protect their own commits, and close on other commits at a rate like 22 to 24, not 2025. They're confident in the plan, and now they got to get it done.
That's it, man. They've usually been good at the end. Last year they weren't, so they want to be good. But they also want to get this class in a place where you don't rely. Like, it's not like, oh, we're just going to flip everybody. You got to get this to a high place, top 10, top 5 type class going into the season, and then you flip. So that's, I think, the goal. Over 1,500 on, by the way, live. Like, share, and subscribe. Get us to 10,000 subscribers. 10,000 subscriber, man. You'll be a legend. Let's get it done. Please, appreciate you guys.
We got to catch up to Alex, man.
Shoot, man. We got he needs to stay in.
We got a long way to go.
He needs to stay in Italy and not record shows for a while for that one to happen. But hey, Pete. So what do you got going? What's on the agenda today?
Guys, I gotta hop off here. Everybody. But great catching up with everyone and getting the latest here in the bank. And we'll see you guys. I'll see you guys tomorrow.
See you, Pete. Enjoy Spain. So tagging out, now tagging in. We got one